Hello, everyone. Great to see all of you here again. I'm Shushan, coach and co-founder of Arki Singapore, and I'm your host today. And on behalf of Temasek Ecosparities platform and Arki Singapore, I want to welcome all of you once again to now our finale workshop of Sustainacity Urban Innovation Challenge. It's 3 weeks already. How fast is that? And thank you all of you for your enthusiasm and making it this far into the competition. Well done. So now before we start, we just need to quickly, we need you to take the next 30 seconds or 1 minute to rename your Zoom profile. So do this, name it as your team name, followed by your name. Can we show the slide, please? There you go. Team name, followed by your name. And no nicknames, please. And this is very important because we need to know who you are when we administer the attendance later. All right? How are we looking? It's everybody getting the team names and your own names up. Let's take a look. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Okay, we have one, Jillian, Luhan, whichever team you belong to, please label your team and then your name. All right, this is very important. And Jiaxuan, and T. King Peter. Lovely name. Please label your team. All right, team, how are we looking? Okay, I think we are quite good now. I think we are pretty good now. So at this stage of the competition, I hope you have already gotten in touch with your coaches to discuss your ideas. All of you to one of the most important and final steps of your design process, and that is storytelling. It's about crafting your pitch, sharing that brilliant idea of yours that have the power to move people, move judges. How do you make it credible, understandable, and memorable? All right. And today we also have our speakers. The session will not be complete without our industry experts who will be speaking with all of you. And this week, we are honored to have two industry veterans. Ask questions throughout the session for our speakers as well as coaches, which we'll do our best to answer as many as we can along the way. All right. So it is the same drill. Log into Slido to post your questions there. Okay. All right. So now we know that urban planning and architecture play a big part in moving a city towards a sustainable future. Then again, the concept of sustainable development has many different sides. What are the key considerations if we are looking to design buildings, infrastructure, or a city for a sustainable outcome? Our first speaker today, Nina Yang, is the Chief Executive Officer of SJ City Global, as I mentioned earlier. She is unable to join us live today, but don't worry, because we were able to spend some time with her and we've made a really nice recording of Nina. with her great advice, tips, and sharing some very notable case studies for all of you out there. So, and a little bit about Nina. Nina has spent more than 30 years of diverse experience from designing buildings, master planning, to region development. And Nina has spearheaded large-scale urbanization projects in Singapore and in multiple countries, including China, India, Kazakhstan, Australia, and across the regions. Nina started her career as an architect in the Singapore public sector before crossing over to the private sector. She has dedicated her career to translating social, environmental, and economic aspirations into meaningful spaces for people. So now let's take a look at what Nina has to say to all of us.
I want to start by just giving you a very, in less than 5 minutes, my 30 years of involvement in the built environment. From my early days as an architect and then to what I'm doing currently. So when I joined the School of Architecture, I think what really enticed me was that architecture is the art and science of building. Above here are definitions by Oxford Dictionary, by Britannia, and also by the Webster Dictionary. But most importantly is if you see the caption of that interview, what attracted me is about creating spaces for people and the chance to deal with social issues. Of course, I didn't realize what I asked for in dealing with social issues. It can be quite complex. And actually, the art of building is not what you think. It's not just about aesthetic. It's not just about creating beautiful design. As I learned over my career, the art is actually a lot more than that. It's the art of combining the layers of requirements that is rendered over a building or a city. The art is about understanding the different needs of the stakeholders. As the building gets bigger and bigger, the stakeholders become a lot more complex, and the art is about navigating the needs of different groups of people. And actually, I find that we only spend maybe 10% of our time coming up with the concept and the design, and the rest is
recording
really
in progress
technique and art of construction and putting in the needs of various groups of users. So during my humble days as an architect, this was one of the first building I worked on. I think I should say that I designed it from scratch. From every piece of the building, I had involved in the design. As a fresh architect, you want to do everything down to the door handle. You want to design it yourself. Yeah. And then along the way, the projects get bigger and bigger and bigger. Of course, no need to go through my whole life history, but suffice to know that my projects got bigger and bigger, and it became really about building cities. Right now, I'm working on a township project in Vietnam, and it is 10 square kilometer. 10 square kilometer is the size of Sengkang, if you just want to have an idea of the scale. So this is one of the smaller projects. I also have along the way worked on a lot of projects in China, and a more recent one would be a Guangzhou Knowledge City that I also worked on. You see the area view. When we first started the project, it's just lychee plantation. It's just farmland. And this is 8 years into the development. And this is really about building cities. And also about building a larger city, which is almost larger than Singapore. It's 1,018 square kilometer, which is all the way in Central Asia. I think the places get more and more exotic along as time goes by. my work brings me to places which you normally would not go to or may not put it in your list of places to visit. But that's what makes it even more exciting about being involved in building buildings and making cities. And I like to say that from architecture definition to what is urban planning. Urban planning is the building of towns, but it comes down to building infrastructure and roads and sewage treatment plant. Also comes down to green and parks and waterways so that people can live in. Well, over here, the definition say live, but actually most of the time building cities is about job creation. It's about creating a place for economic development. And as the project gets bigger, I think the definition of sustainability takes on a different dimension. It is no longer about energy conservation. It's no longer about what in Singapore we call green mark design. It's really about looking at economic sustainability, social sustainability, and then environmental sustainability at an urban scale. So here, I like to also put a point that we are in a very exciting place here in Asia because 2/3 of the population is growing here in Asia, and there are more and more cities being built every day in Asia. But because of the need to keep up with population demand, the government often turns to private sector for speed and capacity in building cities. And when you looked at building cities, sustainability means different things for different people. I think looking at multiple perspectives, understanding where people are coming from is very important in dealing with sustainability issues. I think in a very simple table here, I put forward in larger urban development, what do government look for? What do policymaker, governments and mayors look for? And also what do private sector look for? So you looked at in one subject matter, for instance, if you look at infrastructure, government is about how to find money to build the infrastructure. You can do the best infrastructure, you can be, net zero or whatever. In the end, for government, is the economic sustainability, how to find the money to do that infrastructure. And when you come down to private sector, then they are always looking at how ready the infrastructure is. So in the subject matter of infrastructure, different people takes on a different perspective. When it comes to master planning, urban planning, for the government, it is about managing the land effectively so that eventually there can be income derived from land sale. There can also be taxes derived to support the first subject matter, which is the building of infrastructure, and also to support continued economic development. But for private sector, what do they look for? They want to be in urban planning. They want to do urban planning so that they can have an early entry into the projects. They want to be part of the process in creating a city, and they want to have the first mover advantage. And so on and so forth. When you look at real estate development, for government, of course, selling land is one thing, but for them, a lot of time is about job creation. What kind of industry can be brought in? How do you build homes for people? How do you attract and retain talents? For private sector, of course, for real estate, it is looking at how to deliver the commercial benefits and the economic sustainability for their shareholders, right? So when you look at what urban planning is, urban planning means different things to different sets of people. It means different things to the government. It means different things to the private sector developer. So I think for me, moving from building and going bigger into cities, it was a very long journey. And a lot of these I learned from interacting with different
Recording stopped.
stakeholders. The textbook teach you something about the arts and science of building, but as you move along, you have different sort of takeaway from projects. And doing projects in Singapore and doing project elsewhere is also very different, because Singapore is, after all, a very we are a city state, so the government system is very flat. But anywhere outside Singapore, you have the central, you have the province, and then you have the districts. And again, sustainability means different things at different level. Yeah. So that's my sort of very broad introduction from building to cities. The skill sets you have from doing architecture and doing urban planning could be quite different. Yeah. And I also realized along the way that some of my colleagues would prefer to just work on buildings, but some of us actually would like to build on cities. Yeah. And you do need to develop quite different skill sets. And I realized that I was speaking to one of you earlier, that I realized that actually history classes and geography classes were actually very important, because it provides you the sort of geopolitical background, even the historical background, and set the context on why things are evolved in certain way. And when you do work outside in the host country, you have to be very respectful of how things have evolved over time. Yeah. And I was asked to also share of innovations that I have encounter, which were very memorable to me. I really like to share this in my encounter with Singapore's water story. Some of us may remember in around 2006, Singapore had this idea of ABC waters. A is for active, B is for beautiful, and C is for clean. And it was actually quite an innovative way. It was spearheaded by PUB, our water agency, to really rethink our stormwater management. Well, so these were some of the reportings that were done. I think there were a lot of publicity then about what ABC, because it is a completely change of mindset at the policy level, at the government agency level, but all the way down to architects and developers of individual buildings. Okay, so why I say so? For us, we are in the tropics. In Singapore, we have this challenge that because we are actually one of the world's most water scarce country. I think most of you know that we have 4 water taps, and it is always about how do we increase our water sustainability. I think water is a very important lifeline for us as a country, and it's really how to make ourselves self-sufficient in water. So, but we do not have enough land to create reservoir to keep waters. Other countries, they have lakes and a whole catchment area that are much larger than what we can imagine. But for us, the same land, we're competing for the same land for doing urban development, which is the same land that you want to also have to create reservoir, right? So the same water that we collect from our rain is also the same water that may flood our city, because if we do not have enough water space to keep the water, it will cause flooding. But that's also the water we want to keep. So it's always a balance about how do we manage our stormwater, right? So in the past, it is a very simple way of having more drainage to drain the water out. So if you remember, a lot of us have no idea of a lot of our river, like Bedok, it's called Bedok Canal, but actually it's a river, right? So because of our tropical rain, when the rain comes, the water can build up very fast. It can be from 1 meter and build up to 3-4 meter depth in terms of the water, the amount of water that is drained through our canals. So what over the past we have been doing is to concretize our river so that it becomes more like drain and it can be very deep. So what happens is when we use, this is typically what we do to our canal. So most of the time when dry, it is very little water. But if you look at the rainfall, when the rain hits, the water can build up very fast. So we have changed a lot of our river to very concrete canal. So we have no memories of nice river stream. They are mostly canal, Bedok Canal, I mean, you name it, whatever, Punggol Canal, whatever canal it is. But through the ABC waters, which is what we call water sensitive urban design, the concept is if the water can be better managed, meaning that we create more space, whether it is through open space that we allow water to stay, or through roof terraces, creating spaces for water to be slowed down. It is basically about slowing down the water flow so that the water can, instead of half an hour, takes 3 hours to slowly drain into our canal. And it is a mindset change, because in the past it's about making the canal bigger, more concrete, so that it can drain the high volume of water. But now if you think, okay, now you require developer to have spaces in their buildings that can slow down the water flow, it actually can change the form of buildings and set different standard for draining the rainwater. So imagine the impact it has on planning and the impact it can have eventually onto the building. So if I may say, a section like this, so now you can have water, you can have swales, you can have green roofs, yeah, to slow down. You can have more things along the canal so that you can allow your river to come back and be natural again. Of course, it's never going to be as natural as the original river, because when we do buildings, we do have create more impermeable surface. So instead, the past, the water would have just drained into the soil, but right now it will all have to be taken off from the surface runoff. So it can never be the same, but at least it allows us the opportunity to build back more soft edges and allow people to be able to come closer to the river. And this is the dream that we have. Instead of, can you remember, this is what we see a lot for our concrete canal. But with that concept of slowing down the water over a longer period of time, we can maybe try to bring back some of this more natural water edges. And because you slow down, it's no longer a dangerous thing. You can allow people to come closer to the waterfront. And I think many of you would know that this is what we did in the Bishan Park. You see that in the 70s, we have created a concrete canal. And then with this ABC idea, we actually have brought the river back into the Bishan Park. And the canal is gone here, and you can see the river is now is brought back into life. And then a lot of these banks on the two sides of the river are for water retention during a heavy rain. Of course, we can't do this everywhere in Singapore, because it does mean that we need more land. But people are actually rethinking how we deal with our water age, and it is no longer something that you turn your back away from. And hence, we have Punggol Waterway, we have the Punggol New Town, which is built around the waterway. Personally, I've worked on a few projects. I have worked on a Sengkang floating island that you bring into the middle of a waterway. There are rain gardens that we built also next to Lower Seletar Reservoir, all in this concept of rethinking how you deal with stormwater, and then your waterways and your water body is no longer a dangerous place, and you can allow people to come closer. And imagine the kind of social space that we can create for people to come out to use. So I thought this whole idea of stormwater management was something that I have never learned in school. I mean, as an architect, I think we never learned this. And also, this stormwater management is nothing new outside Singapore. I think it's very much often utilized in places of lower rainfall. But when we brought it to Singapore, because our rainfall is so intense and it builds up so fast, there was a lot of innovation that we need to do to customize it to Singapore's context and Singapore's rainfall and our needs. So it's this whole innovation that I thought it's very memorable, and was very happy that during my career I have a chance to be involved in projects of this nature. And you look at environmental design in a different light. I spend a lot of my time with environmental engineers as well, with landscape architects as well. And actually you find that the profession just gets ever more interesting, because you always deal with different people coming from different angles and bringing their expertise to the table. Okay, so little bit more about how the profession has transformed. I think I would just like to say that it has come to a point where multidisciplinary is very important. If you hear what I said about planning and even about buildings, multidisciplinary approach is a very important aspect, especially when sustainability become a very key element in everything that we do in the built environment. And you do need multiple expertise to be layered on top. And the organization that I'm with, Sabana Jurong, is one such multidisciplinary organization. And I also want to say that climate change is really having a profound impact on everything that we do. We now, as an architect and a planner, or even as a developer, just traditional way of doing design, that art and science of building, it takes on a completely different dimension. And we need to develop capacity and capabilities in ESG, carbon accounting, of course, decarbonization journey, all the expertise that are related to that. And also in terms of how we look at energy solution, the need to understand solar, wind, tidal, geothermal, maybe not in Singapore, but in a lot of work we do outside Singapore. I think hydrogen is the favorite word now. Waste to energy, and a lot of knowledge about energy capture and energy storage. I just find that the profession gets ever more and more complex. Yeah, that's where we really need to learn to work with multi capabilities. Yeah, and even in the way when we work with our developers, we need to know how to sort of find ability to fund the project, and how does that link to sustainability and targets that we set for ourselves that will allow us to help the developer to go out to get financing. Yeah. So even from that angle, we will also have to develop the capability on that. And I just want to this is my second last slide. I just want to say that if you remember my first slide on the first buildings that I worked on, and now looking at it, today when you look at and design a building, it's no longer about how the facade look like, how the function of the users are being catered for. You now have to look at environmental resiliency. You do have to look at social resiliency, ability to create different type of spaces, hybrid working method. And of course, you also need to know about health resiliency. How do you create spaces so that your employee can work in a very healthy environment? So the art of building and the science of building is very different from where I started out maybe 30 years ago. Yeah. And I think I was also asked to say, how do you, from my experience, achieve buy-ins from clients, policymakers, and local communities? I think I would like to again go back to this slide where really it depends on who you're talking to. I think the same subject matter can mean different things to different audience. I think when you are presenting your case, you have to know who you are dealing with and what your audience may be coming from. But having said that, I think most importantly is this 3 point. Be very clear in defining your problem statement. And usually as architects or planner, we like to, after define a problem statement, we like to go into analyzing, this is how my design look like, this is how my master plan looks like. And then your audience may get lost. I've always told my people that I worked with that maybe after defining problem statement, always begin with the end in place. You tell the audience, today, this is what we're going to bring you to. At least by today, at the end, what is the objective of today's presentation? So begin with the end in place so that your audience know where you are leading them to. Yeah. And then finally is always think from multiple perspectives. Today's world is not just, I have a project, a hospital I'm building is built for 700 beds, and then that's just one direction. You'll need to look at, environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and economic sustainability. And you really have to be able to address the issues from multiple perspectives and be sensitive that there are people who may look at it from a completely different perspective. Yeah. So I think if you could at least be sensitive to the last point, I think it will make your buy-in a little bit smoother. But whatever it is, always begin with 1 and 2, because I do find sometimes people go into presentation without telling them what is the problem I'm trying to solve and what is the likely solution I may come up with. Yeah, I'm going to just end here. Yeah.
This is Ting Ting speaking. I have a question actually, because you were talking about how there are different stakeholders in place and everybody
Recording
comes
in
with a different
progress.
agenda. So was there like a significant project that all of you collectively worked on, and then you had to make very difficult trade-offs? Maybe it's an environmental trade-off, or was it like a social trade-off, and such that, because economics is very important, right? And we are all very pragmatic and realistic people, especially in development. So was there a difficulty you faced, and then collectively you had to make that kind of trade-off? Maybe you can share your experience with students.
Yeah, I think it was a learning process for me. Earlier on in my career, I used to think that yeah, you want to give the best to your client, and you always think that design, if I do a good design, your client will appreciate and they will implement it. But I think this trade-off happens all the time. I think when you're doing design for buildings, the trade-off is really the site constraint. If the site is of this nature, already you are looking at trade-off already. And then without even having to go into the question of budget is always a trade-off that we have to deal with. Yeah. So you do have to balance it. Then when I come to city development, I think that I won't call it trade-off. You really have to make sure that you address the different needs. For instance, if I'm doing a site that is at a waterfront and there is a river, and we know that the river does flood, then the question is, do you leave the whole development high so that it is above the flood level? But that's going to be, again, expensive, and you cannot find the soil to do the filling. So instead, how else can I design it so that I can address the flooding issue? But the minute when you start to address that, you also means that you do have to give part of the land to, say, water bodies, to lake for water retention. So it means that the land you have for development would be less. Then it is about how do you make use of this so-called trade-off. So if I have to have water bodies, then maybe it's about creating an eco township. It's about the waterfront becomes valuable for the residents as well. So you sort of turn your trade-off into advantage for the project. Yeah. And so I must say that we deal with it all the time, but don't think of it as trade-off. Think of how you can then use it to your advantage and actually give you an edge and make the project differentiated. Yeah.
And Nina, this is Shu Xian. From your point of view, for urban planning initiatives, how do you measure the success of so-called a sustainable urban planning initiative? What metrics would you sometimes do you use to evaluate them?
I think we have the LEED also have some LEED standard for LEED neighborhood. I think if you talk about low carbon, green design, sustainability design, there are many standards out there. I think I remember talking to a colleague, I think over the last 3 or 4 years, there are at least 30 standards that are being evolved and being developed. So if you talk about, whether you follow certain sort of established way of codes or established way of assessing KPIs, there are many that out there. Yeah. But for me, I think it's still, again, a master plan, a plan that can overlay the social issues and the economic issues as well as the environmental issues into one layer, into one master plan. And of course, a lot of it is about the whole notion of how do you execute the master plan. I think that's most important. Yeah.
Recording stopped.
Wow, that was a very enriching session. I hope all of you have taken note of her advice. So one takeaway from me is be very clear about defining the problem statement and begin with an end in place. So keep in mind of that advice. And so now that we are on the topic of urban planning, let's take a look at one of the key pillars that forms the bedrock of sustainable city, and that's urban mobility. The concept of urban mobility has now expanded to the air. Urban air mobility, or UAM, is a rapidly growing field that will revolutionize the way we move within and between cities by providing faster, more efficient, and supposedly more sustainable transportation solutions. So is the solution that simple? And what impact does it have on the future of sustainable urban planning? I'm delighted to introduce our next guest speaker, Willie Lee. He's the Senior Aviation Business Manager at Volocopter. And now Volocopter is a German aviation company
Recording
that
in progress.
specializes in the development of electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, and a pioneer in the field of urban air mobility. And really leads the establishment of Volocopter's operations in Singapore, from compliance, flight and ground operations, engineering, safety to crisis management. And prior to joining Volocopter, Willie held senior positions in Scoot, a Singapore low-cost airline, where he oversaw the safety, sustainability, and quality aspects of the flight operations. He was also a senior team member formerly with the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore. And now I have another interesting fact about Willie. He started his career as an experimental test pilot. So how cool is that? Right now, please join me to welcome Willie. Hello. Hi, Willie.
Hi, everybody.
Very glad
Good
to have
afternoon to
you.
all of you.
Yeah, very glad to have you here with us today. And so now, Willie, please tell us about the urban challenges that Volocopter is looking to solve and how that's working out in different cities. Please take it away.
Sure, I'll take it from here. Thanks, Shuin.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon to everybody. My name is Willie. I'm the Senior Aviation Business Manager for Volocopter Asia. We are a subsidiary of Volocopter GmbH, which is located in Germany. And our ambition is to be the first in the world to bring urban air mobility to life. So as part of my introduction, I'm actually a very playful person. So the company is actually risking their reputation and branding, putting me in front for this presentation, but I don't care. I really hope that I could actually see all of you and hear all of you. That's how I always do my presentation. Well, as part of the introduction, I was told to share my background, and this is actually the most boring piece. I promise you I will not take more than a minute. So I spent 23 years in the Air Force as a military experimental test pilot, doing crazy things, so my friends say. Then when I retired, I joined the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore as a deputy head of flight operations. At the same time, I flew with Tiger Air as a commercial pilot, and I also helped Volocopter at that time to come to Singapore during the Intelligent Transport System World Congress 2019 to do a flight demonstration over the Marina Bay. Once I've completed that project, I thought it was time to move on, and I joined Scoot, running 4 departments, namely safety, security, sustainability, and quality. After 2 years, Volocopter were looking for someone to help them obtain their operator's license, which is like the airline license, and to set up operations. So here I am. I'm with Volocopter, bringing urban air mobility to life in Singapore. Today, I would like to share my experience and my knowledge that I've gained over 32 years in the aviation industry with all of you. But bear in mind, I'm only 35 years old in my mind. Now, for today's conversation, I would frame in 3 different steps. The first thing is I will talk about Volocopter's journey in the past and moving forward in the future in air mobility. Second is how we as a company can contribute to building a sustainable ecosystem while building a business. And I'll close off by sharing with you the fun time in all this journey. Some people would say that there are challenges, but I like to frame them as fun. So before I proceed, I have a short video clip to share, and I hope the video works. It's not going to take too much of the time. It gives you a very good view of what Volocopter is all about. Enjoy. Okay. I hope you can hear the sound. I hope the video have excited all of you. Let's move on. So the video have given you actually a very quick sense of where we were and where we are going. Now, the story started in 2011 when three of our founders have this idea of creating a urban air mobility. The picture you see, it's our very first prototype aircraft. Okay, so three of them built a multi-rotor electric vehicle, put a yoga ball below just in case if they fall off, the pilot has some cushion. So this is famously now in the company known as the yoga ball flight. This gave birth to the very first generation aircraft of Volocopter. The second generation prototype aircraft, as you can see here, was built in 2016, successfully flown with our founder on board, and it is called the VC200. The third generation aircraft, the 2X, was the one that flew in Singapore during the 2019 Intelligent Transport System World Congress over the Marina Bay. At this moment in time, we are developing our fourth generation aircraft, and this will be the VoloCity, the focus of our conversation today. Now, I will bring you through as this video plays. You can see that the VoloCity is a two-seater aircraft. It took its very first maiden flight in December 2022. It has got 18 electric powered motors. It can cruise at about 90 kilometers an hour with a range of 35 kilometers. Now, these aircraft will be type certified under the stringent rules of both the European and Singapore authorities. And the safety standard that we're trying to achieve is 10 to the power of -9. Many of you would ask,
Recording stopped.
What does 10 to the power of -9 means? I give you something to contextualize. The Airbus 350, the Boeing 737 that we fly today in commercial air transport, they are also certified to 10 to the power of -9. Helicopters are actually certified to just 10 to the power of -7. So we are at least 100 times safer than helicopters. That probably gave you a good flavor. Now, from the video, you can see Volocopter builds a suite of aircraft ranging from the VoloCity, which operate within the city boundary up to a 35 kilometers range. And we have the Volodrone. The Volodrone, it's 80% the construct of the VoloCity, but instead of carrying a cabin, it carries a heavy cargo drone. The VoloRegent, it goes further. It carries more people and more payload, so it connects city to city. Now, all these aircraft, for them to operate within the ecosystem, it is supported by this software platform We call it the Volo IQ. Pretty much like your Grab and your Uber app that you're familiar with. Now, we have conducted more than 1,500 test flights worldwide with full regulatory approval since 2016. And
Recording in progress.
And we have achieved many firsts. Truly, we are the market leaders in the future of urban air mobility. These slides will give you an idea of our ambition of how we bring urban air mobility to life, starting with Paris next year in 2024, followed by Singapore, Rome, and thereafter expanding to over 40 cities globally. As pioneer to urban air mobility, we also strive to build a business with sustainability in life. Now, what is sustainability? Let me share with you. Sustainability is about meeting the current needs of our current generation without compromising the future. I hope you understand that. Let me make it even simpler for you, which means to say, all of us have our needs. We have our needs of lifestyle, we have our needs of air conditioning, our own vehicle. But as we fulfill these needs, we must make sure that we do not compromise the needs of our future generation. When we talk about sustainability, we have to tie in with the ESG framework that our government in Singapore have put in place. So I'll talk about E stands for the environment, S the social, and G is the governance. So this is the part that I earn my money in school as the director for sustainability. So, well, when we talk about environment, we always talk about reducing the global carbon footprint. If I were to make it easy, can you imagine the Airbus 380 4-engine when they put power and they start to climb out? It actually emits a lot of carbon, and carbon is not good to the world. It actually have adverse impact to our climate. And many people have talked about industrial requirement, and we start burning coal, and we're burning up all these natural resources in the world at the same time, generating a lot of carbon emission. And we are wasting food, we're wasting a lot of unnecessary resources. Now, in Volocopter, I'll aim immediately with a suite of electric vehicles. We do not emit any carbon to contaminate the world further. An example that we want to use renewable energy, which the Singapore government is brilliant in. We have a pipeline from Australia piping to Singapore where we have energy that is bought from Australia, solar powered. For us, our batteries in the aircraft, once they finish their aviation life cycle, we do not just throw them away. We're working with research institutions around the world and also in Singapore, how we can now upcycle, recycle these batteries for other usage. In the social front, Volocopter have 56 nationalities in our company. We actively promote diversity and we participate in events like today as part of our involvement into the community. On the governance front, we ensure while we maximize shareholders' rights, we also want to develop a fair compensation package across all employees with all ethnicity and location. Now, so that's Volocopter. All these do not come easy, and our journey is certainly not a bed of roses. Now, but that's where the fun begins. All right. As you know, in the aviation industry, it is a highly regulated environment, and public safety can never be compromised. So we have committed to build our aircraft to meet the highest safety standard of 10 to the power of minus 9. This goal is both complicated and costly, but Volocopter wants to achieve that. And that's our commitment. As you know, there is no existing regulation for our industry. Especially in our industry, you're talking about building an airline, building an airport, which we call it vertiport. There is no existing regulation. So what are we talking about? And this is the fun. I mean, we are very lucky to have the regulators from Europe and in Singapore that we could work closely. What do? We do not want to reinvent the wheel. We use existing regulation, we examine that, and we adapt. There are times that we may even have to build new regulations to actualize urban air mobility. That's how the European and the Singapore regulators work closely with Volocopter, and we hope that we can bring urban air mobility to life as early as 2024. So I've talked about the example of the airline and vertiport. Today, there is no precedent to it, but that's the fun, working with people of like-mindedness, wanting to actualize a new modality to the world. I don't have to dwell much more into costing. Starting an airline, building an airport, it's a costly business. Changi Airport is spending what, $7 or $8 billion just to build Terminal 5. It is a lot of money. Above all, the risk identification and management is key to aviation. We have no idea at this moment in time what are the risks that could impact our operation. But how does the European and the Singapore regulator deal with this together with Volocopter? It is a mindset shift. We decided that we will adopt what we call a risk-based approach in this journey. So we start to discover what we don't know and we address them step by step. We learn and we manage collectively. We own the risk together. And that's how we can realize and actualize urban air mobility. Now, I'd like to share this quote with you. With all this fun, really it's not easy. Sometimes it's really funny. But what does it mean? Walk away, give it up? That's very easy. Not me. I always believe nothing comes easy. There will be uncertainty. There will be challenges. You want to write history? You must find the iron in you to overcome these challenges. Remember, tough times don't last. Tough men do. Find that iron in you, frame your journey, and overcome the hurdles instead of looking at them as roadblock. So our plan is to actualize, okay, I may need someone to help me click. The last bullet point is not coming up. But what it says is, look out for us. Look out for us in Singapore. We will be launching, Volocopter will be launching in Singapore as early as Q4 2024. And let's work towards bringing urban air mobility to life in a sustainable way. With that, I thank you. And I open the floor to questions. And this is going to be quite fun because I just realized that I'm the only live presenter here that will be facing your question.
Thank you, Hui Li. Thank you so much for the very fun and insightful sharing. And yes, I think we do have a couple of questions lined up for you. Can we take a look? All right, it's more than a couple. So shall we take the first one, really?
Sure.
Are we envisioning a future where the skies are full of these? full of these volocopters. So how do we justify that? What studies have there been in terms of impact to the avian biodiversity? That's a good one.
That's a very good question. That's a very good question, and I like that. So, do we envision? Personally, I do, and I want to. I want to embrace that believe to see instead of seeing is believing. Now, this get my mind to overdrive. If you look at Singapore, you can say that we may not have a traffic congestion problem, but our roads are getting more and more congested. And Singapore is really a very limited land mass, 760 square kilometers. There is no way we can reclaim anymore. Our neighbors are shouting. Which means to say we can't continue to build more roads and add more vehicles on the road. But if you look above you, there's this airspace from 10 feet to the 1,000 feet region that is not being exploited at this moment in time. For those of you who are of the generation that have watched this movie called Fifth Element, believe that this day will happen. Believe that this day you will see a lot of Volo City, Volo region, Volo drones flying in this sub 1,000 feet airspace. When that happens, we can elevate the current surface vehicle demand upward and free up the traffic demands on the road. Is that going to happen tomorrow? No. Is that going to happen 5 years, 10 years? Challenging. It's going to be really fun. Where is the fun? The fun is to create the regulation and that all of us, you and I, my parents, my children, accept that urban air mobility becomes part of our life. Embracing a fully electric or a hydrogen-powered vehicle in the future certainly contributes significantly to sustainability. I hope I have answered this question.
Thank you, Willie. And the second question, I think it probably represents what a lot of people have in mind. So who is the target audience? Who exactly is the target audience? And do you expect costs to be a trade-off if not everyone is able to afford this very high-end technology?
I can't speak for everybody. I can't speak for the rest of the market player, but I speak for Volocopter. We want to bring urban air mobility to everyone, to the masses. In the beginning, the cost would be high, but when we are allowed to scale, I don't need to explain the effect of economy of scales to all of you. But when we are able to scale, we want to bring the cost down to what the general public, the general masses can afford.
All right. I think really we have time for one more question.
Sure.
Yeah. So yes. Right. We have this one. What kind of battery does Volocopter run on? How do you ensure the sustainability of this battery life cycle?
Well,
very technical question.
Very technical question. Thank you. But fortunately, I'm an aerospace engineer. So yes, no rocket science. Today, batteries running vehicles and also the one that Volo City use are lithium batteries. Lithium batteries at this moment in time, we are still trying to build a high density battery, which means to say we could extend the battery life cycle to as long as we could. Are we there yet? I think this is a technological question. Personally, I want to believe that we are able to reach there in 2 years, in 3 years, in a very short period in time. Today, the OODA loop, the observe, orientate, and then decide and act loop is very quick. I have no doubt we will reach that kind of battery desired battery cycle soon. Now then, what do we do when these battery lifespans is exhausted? Well, like I mentioned, aviation certification is very, very stringent. When this battery life runs out and is no longer suitable for aviation standards, it is still able to be used in many other areas, like your cars, your handphone, maybe next time your TV screen, your laptop battery. This drives us to constantly challenge the university, the researcher, how we can upcycle, recycle the batteries. I hope I have given you a good answer.
Indeed, you have, Willie. Thank you so much. And teams, that's all we have the time for. And if you have more questions, and really, if you look through the deck, you see that there are actually a few more questions, but we just don't have the time for that. And thank you very much for your time. So teams, if you have more questions, you can write to us, sustainability@archi.sg, or if you want to write directly to Willie, we have gotten his permission that you can, but you need to tell us who you are, and we can let you have his email address. Correct, Willie? That's correct?
Yes, you're most welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure. It's my honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Willie. Thanks for joining us. See you again. Bye-bye. Okay. And teams, it's been 2 great sharing sessions from the speakers, and very soon it'll be time for our 5 minutes break. And when we return, Coach Ting Ting, and where's Coach Ting Ting? She will take you through the very fun process of storytelling, crafting that winning pitch. Hi, Coach Ting Ting.
Hi, Sushan. That was a
Hey.
really nice session we had with Willie just now.
Yeah, and what have you got for them after the break?
So we have a session where we will teach them how to do storytelling well, how to craft a
Awesome.
narrative, how to convince and influence the judges to be on your side.
Woohoo! All right, so everybody, freshen up. 5 minutes. We'll see you later, and we'll pass the baton to Coach Ting Ting. Thank you. See you all later.